Do you have an SSD? You do. You have an SSD.
Yeah, I have an SSD in here, and I'm about to buy one for my ThinkPad.
You're going to add it?
Yeah.
Your timing is perfect. We've got an SSD expert here.
Absolutely, bring it on, because I need to know this stuff.
Good. You ask the questions. It'll help you buy. Allyn Malventano is here. He's been helping people buy SSDs for years now at PC Perspective. Hey, Allyn.
How's it going?
Former NSA analyst, by the way. Did you know that?
Now we got to kill you.
Okay. While you're here, I've got some questions about...
So anyway, Allyn, you've been testing when did SSDs start to become kind of widespread in the consumer?
It was probably right around what the X25M came out.
That was the Intel, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was somewhere around 2008 or so.
It's around that time when people still had the. It was still really expensive though, so people held on.
Yeah. It was 80 gig was like $700 when that drive first came out. So.
What's the price per gigabyte now? It's come way, way down.
Yeah, it runs around 30 cents a gig or so.
What? That's unbelievable. I was going to say $1 a gig.
No. It's 30 cents a gig. It's for SATA.
Yeah. Okay. But so the point being, there's no reason when you get a new computer not to get an SSD, or is there?
I mean, at this point, you should at least get one that's. You don't have to get one that's going to hold everything.
Your boot drive. Your
boot drive, the thing with Windows on it, the thing with most of your apps on it, that should definitely be an SSD at this point. Just the performance you get for the money is, just at a minimum for that stuff, right? Is just definitely worth it.
We're talking hundreds of megabytes a second read and writes. I mean, we're just talking huge speed now.
Oh yeah, they usually, if it's a serial ATA one, they'll. Usually, it's pretty easy for them to saturate it, which is over 500 meg per second. And then if you go crazy like you did with your Ultimate VR build, then you're doing like 2 gigabytes a second.
Yeah, I put mine on M.2 NVMe. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about what that all means. But we want to help Ian go shopping, so he's retrofitting an older laptop.
Yeah, I've got a ThinkPad X220. I've had it for nearly 5 years now.
So that's going to be SATA, right, Allyn?
It should be.
Yeah. So if you get the newer stuff, you can get the SSD on PCI Express, on the faster bus. The SATA bus is kind of limited. But does that mean you shouldn't get an SSD? You shouldn't upgrade to an SSD?
You mean just if you didn't have PCI available?
Yeah, if you're still on SATA. Is SATA fast?
No.
You said you saturate it.
You saturate it compared to a hard drive, which doesn't come anywhere near saturating it.
Right.
I threw in the show notes, the first link I put in there was a chart from some of our recent testing that we developed that shows latency of devices, right? So if you look at that chart there, to the left is faster, and the narrower that little ramp, like the steeper the ramp, the better, right? So to the left, there's that cluster of 3 drives. Those are all NVMe PCIe drives.
Okay.
Right.
And then you got that blue and that green line. Those are SATA SSDs.
Okay.
Right. And then there's a kind of orangey red line there. That's an older, like a OCC Revo drive that did RAID of SATA devices over PCI, so it had a bunch of hops to make to get there, so it kind of slowed it down a little bit more. But if you look at those 3 ramps there to the right, little ski slope looking things that are, if you look, they're between like 2 and 3 orders of magnitude, because that's a logarithmic scale.
Wow.
Slope. Those are hard drives.
Yeah.
Right?
So now latency is an interesting stat. We're not talking about read or write speed. We're talking about how fast it can get to the data before it reads and writes it. Is that
this
right?
is in terms of storage stuff, it's more like how nimble is it, right?
Nimble.
If you're looking for a bunch of different things from different places on the storage, and it has to, in the case of our hard drive, it actually has to move an arm. You know, like
there's zero
move the needle,
seek time on
part of the
SSDs.
record.
Yeah.
So on SSDs you have effectively 0, right?
Yeah.
On that graph, it's like the lowest or the fastest part of that chart.
Almost random access, like memory.
Yeah, it's basically it's 10 microseconds is the leftmost point in that.
Wow.
So 100 microseconds per I/O. That's pretty darn fast.
So you're going to get that benefit no matter what bus you're on.
Right, you will get most of that benefit. The NVMe stuff is still just a tiny bit faster, but compared to a hard disk,
right?
Even if it's on SATA, the SSD is just so much faster.
How about SATA 2 or SATA 1? Is that? I mean, now you're really talking a much more constrained bus.
The bus is more constrained. You'll see more of a limit when you're trying to move just sequential files.
Yeah,
You're trying to move big stuff. But the question is, if you have older hardware like that, chances are you don't have another place to move it to that can go as fast as the other thing.
That's a good point.
Right? So it still is a benefit even then, right? And then even with SATA 1, which would be like 150 or maybe almost 200 meg per second, the SSD, especially a modern one, which could go much faster if you plugged it into that faster SATA bus, that one would basically just be like taking a nap while the while the data was going on the older system. And so that drives like that could do like full random access and still saturate the slower SATA bus.
The beauty is everything seems faster. It's the simplest way to take an old computer and make it feel like a brand new computer. Boot up time is faster, apps load faster, data save is faster. And it turns out I/O is more important to the overall speed. We always talk about megahertz and gigahertz in terms of processors, but if you're waiting around for the hard drive, it doesn't matter how many gigahertz your processor is.
This is what's driving me to do it, because I'm so sick of sitting next to people in press conferences who are just like, blink, oh, it's on, right, okay. Whereas I'm thinking,
3-minute
go
boot.
and make a cup of tea, come back, still doing.
Actually, what makes it worse for you is that you're used to what an SSD is like, right? So it's like what I always tell people, or what I did, back when there were a lot of people that hadn't upgraded yet, was if they're on the fence about upgrading, I would tell them, do not sit at anybody's computer that has an SSD in it if you're not ready.
Spoil you forever.
Yeah, because you'll never want to go back.
Well, look at your Chromebook. That's even though that's the old Chromebook.
The first time when I was actually reviewing this, it was just like,
what, it's booted already?
Fast.
Yeah. So are all SSDs alike? I mean, are there some that are better? Are there some that he should avoid?
I mean,
they're all pretty good now.
They're all pretty good. There are some that the easiest thing to do is just, if you see what looks like a good deal on one, what I always tell people is just go look around at the reviews. Chances are you'll see either I have reviewed it or somebody else has reviewed it. And if it is one that's not necessarily that great, the reasons will be in that review, right?
Okay. But Samsung's EVOs are pretty good, right?
So dang near every SSD that has come out of Samsung, I have never really had a way to fault it. Okay. Right? They're just like, they're just super fast.
The firmware is good, the speed's good, the reliability is good.
Yep. Samsung is one of the companies that has the advantage of they do the whole thing, right? They make their controller. They make their flash, right? They make their whole product is everything in it is Samsung, right? They don't have to worry about sourcing controllers and firmware from other companies, and then there might be some bug to make it work with this other kind of flash or whatever. They don't have to worry about any of that. And they were the first company to do VNAND, which is a very fast vertical oriented NAND memory. It has like 32 or 48 layers worth of flash, or worth of cells on it.
We used to talk about MLC versus SLC, like that was a quality differentiator.
Yep.
That doesn't matter anymore either, does it?
No, it kind of does.
Oh, it does. Okay.
It's not. It's no longer SLC versus MLC, and now it's MLC versus TLC.
Oh. Who makes TLC? Because isn't Samsung MLC?
No, all Samsung Evo drives.
They're all
are
TLC. Okay.
Yes. However,
Intel.
all those Samsung Evos have an SLC cache on them. Okay. Intel's making all the same kind of stuff everybody else is.
These used to be the king of the hill, right? Yeah. If you wanted an SSD, you wanted an Intel drive, and they were much more expensive too.
Yeah, I will say I am the most impressed with Intel's like quality control.
Yeah.
Right. However, Samsung is a very close second in my mind.
I'll tell you, all I buy now is the Samsung EVOs. Is there a big difference in the 940, 940 Pro, 950? Does that matter? The 840, 850, does that matter?
Well, all there is right now, there's if you're in the 900 series, those are all the NVMe PCIe drives.
Right. That's what we have on our Overgum.
Yeah. So the 850 is using VNAND, regardless of Evo or Pro.
Okay.
And the VNAND is a lot faster than the older stuff that they were making. So basically, if you get a 500 gig SSD or larger, you might as well just get the Evo, because even if it runs out of that cache and it's writing to the TLC, it can still saturate SATA.
Write that down. Okay. Get the Evo.
Yeah. So the Evo just makes more sense, honestly, and especially if it's a mobile platform you're putting it in. again, where are you going to get something at, say, 100 or 200 meg per second to even have to write to it, right? So you could get away with even the smaller 850 Evo, and even if the write speed was limited to like 300 meg per second or something.
250 gigs, $100.
That's insane.
$100.
My accounts department are actually going to let me do this. It's great, you know.
Now, should he worry about reliability? Are these as reliable as spinning drives?
Well, especially in a laptop, if you think about it, part of what makes hard drives unreliable on mobile is like dropping them while they're spinning, and the fact that you're moving the thing around, and it's basically a gyroscope, or it's trying to be a gyroscope. And I remember Leo on, I don't know, year or two back, you were like twisting around an external hard drive while it was spinning, and the stream went crazy on it. So you're going to destroy the bearings in it, right? Because the bearings are
well, you can feel the torque because it's spinning, and you've got centrifugal force and
yeah. So you've got all those things like that. It's a mechanical thing. It's a very precise mechanical thing.
They work fine.
But on the other hand,
they do work.
You know what I was doing? I was ejecting them, and they're still spinning when you eject them out of those toasters. And I was going, wow, you can really feel the gyro.
And the bearing is just screaming.
On the other hand, though, if they go wrong, generally you can recover some data from the platters, whereas if a flash drive goes wrong, then that's it, everything's toast. So a good backup strategy is needed, I think.
Is that true?
That is definitely true. SSDs just being solid state, right? The way that they're going to tend to fail is like any other just electronic component. Typically, when an electronic component fails, there's not like I can still use it most of the way. It's usually just done.
No recovery.
Right? Just stops working. Well, there is recovery. It's just expensive.
Right.
And it's coming to the point where it's a similar cost as it is to a hard drive recovery if you were to ship it off to, a data recovery place.
Oh, okay. All right. So they can do that.
Yeah, that's
they
reassuring.
can do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like Drive Savers. I actually toured Drive Savers facility a few months back.
Down the road a piece. Yeah.
Yeah, it actually is, and they've got they had SSDs just ripped open on workbenches all over the place over there. And they can actually just take the data right off of all the individual flash chips and then stitch it all back together the way that it would have been delivered by the controller.
Now,
so it is possible.
So
right?
you don't have to set up a RAID
Ian
system.
is paranoid, and we've already established
Ian cares about his privacy.
He cares about his privacy. And that is one issue with SSDs. It's hard to wipe them completely, is it not?
Well, okay. If you are using any system that uses trim, like just a Windows system or, if you're on a Mac, it will use trim, but it has to be one of basically the SSDs that are certified by Apple.
Right.
There used to be that silly thing like Trim Enabler or something on OS 10, but I'm not sure if that works anymore. But if you're using trim, that actually is a nightmare for forensic people.
Good. We like that.
It is. Even if you're just using not even encryption, but just trim.
He was
because well, I'm even talking from that standpoint too. If you were to try to go through that drive, anything that had been deleted, there's really not an easy way to get that data anymore, right? The SSD will effectively remove those entries from the table, so it doesn't even know where in the flash to look for that stuff that was deleted. There's a chance that it could still be on the flash, but again, you're talking you really got to know what you're doing. You're basically reading raw data off of the flash chips to get that file back. And that's just from having hit delete, right? Like that gets you that far to the point where you can't even run the typical undelete utilities or data recovery utilities you can get off the internet. If you have an SSD,
You're liking that.
I'm
you don't
liking
need D-ban anymore. You got it.
No,
and
I'm
trim.
And as long as you have the drive connected in such a way where Windows will trim it, right? You can basically just go into disk management, delete the partition, and recreate the partition. When you create a partition under Windows, that is when Windows will instruct the drive to trim the whole area if it is an SSD. So nowadays, Windows, in a way, it's not a perfect secure erase, but in a way, it will basically zero out everything that's available to be read from a given SSD that uses trim just by making the partition.
Interesting.
Right? Wow. Remember, the data is still potentially on the flash chips. but like nobody unless you have the knowledge to get that deep into the drive, you're not going to get that info back. And that's, again, not even to the point of turning on encryption. Right?
Excellent.
Do we have enough time, or should we get Allyn to come back next week?
I think this is, yeah.
We got a lot more to talk about. We haven't even gotten to the different kinds of SSDs.
Yeah.
And NVMe and all of that stuff. And plus, your tips for using an SSD, because I know there's different things to do on Mac and different things to do on Windows. Can you come back soon and we'll talk about part 2 of this?
Yeah, we could do a part 2.
Maybe part 3 and 4. Tres and cuatro. Anything Ian should know before he heads to Fry's?
Just look for 850 EVOs.
Can you actually buy them with an operating system pre-installed? Or
What are you, lazy?
Yes, incredibly so. I'm a journalist, for goodness sake. It's indoor work with no heavy lifting.
It's going to blow you away. So I have a new HP laptop. I'll show it next week. And it has Thunderbolt 3, right? So what I did, Allyn, you'll be proud of me, I got the first, as far as I could tell, Thunderbolt 3 enclosure. It's an Akitio, and it supports 2 drives. And you could do RAID 0, RAID 1. I did RAID 0 for speed, right? And I bought 2 Samsung 8. I wasn't sure if I should get the 850 or the 850 Pro. Sounds like it didn't matter.
No, probably not.
Yeah. And they're in RAID 0, which should help in throughput. Of course, Thunderbolt 3 is 40 gigabits per second, so it's pretty fast. And I decided to image the HP before I made too many changes. It backed up a 40 or 50 gig image in like 2 or 3 minutes. I was blown away. I've never seen anything like it. You could watch the bar just go like that.
Yep.
So don't worry. Don't worry. You're going to pull out your window. I have a USB key. I'll give it to you.
No,
you pull out your Windows installer. You'll be done before you know it. It's fast.
That's another very good point, actually. Just along the lines of you should always be backing up no matter what.
Oh yeah.
But if you have your OS drive, which is the place where it's going to have the most amount of really tiny little files, right? If that was a hard disk, your system would be noticeably slower if you had a backup running.
That's true.
In other words, you're writing to a large file somewhere else, but it's trying to it has to read and touch every single individual little file on your C drive in order to get them all into the backup.
And it's using CPU to do this as it's doing it, right?
It's like the CPU is waiting on the thing to come back to answer if it is a hard disk, right? Whereas if it's an NVMe, especially if it's NVMe, you can have a backup running. Like I have backup runnings on systems, and
all the time
I'm doing other things.
Yeah.
Like I don't even do like schedule them to be like at 3 in the morning or whatever. I'm to the point where I can shut my systems down at night.
Yeah.
And just have the stuff that would normally be, I'm going to let that run overnight. No, it's like, it could go while I'm sitting there trying to do other things and don't even notice that the backup.
We image our HTC Vive hard drive, which is an NVMe M.2 drive, as you well know, Allyn, onto the spinning HDs while we're playing games in the VR.
Yeah.
You don't even know. So I image that drive every day. I don't think people who are using it even know, but we're imaging that drive every day. That's why we got 3 terabyte external extra drives.
Reds.
Yeah.
Yep.
For backup, you just run it. It's awesome. There it is. We got the 950 Pro on those. That's nice.
Yeah.
That's nice. That's the M.2.
Hard drives.
Yeah.
And hard drives are perfect for being a destination for backups because they love sequential.
They don't care. They can.
Well,
there's no
they don't
latency
like
because they're writing boom, 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 boom.
Yeah,
boom,
they're just
boom,
writing
boom,
in
boom,
a straight line, one large file.
And those are also in RAID, which helps a little bit with that too when you have the striping, right?
I
Does
think
that help?
you're doing RAID 1 on
Oh,
your
you're
hard
right. We're doing redundancy. That's
yes,
right.
So
we're doing
you're
RAID
only
1.
when you're writing, you're only as fast as one drive.
Right.
But again, it's a sequential file, and those REDs, the 3 terabytes, if you're close to the beginning of the disk, it's like 150 meg per second.
Yeah, it's fast.
So
enough.
it's still pretty fast.
Yeah.
So do it, right?
It has to be done. I'm so sick of my current hard drive. It's just
well, and it's a great way to give new life to an old computer.
exactly.
Frankly.
And I'm not prepared to give up the ThinkPad because I love the keyboard.
Is there a way he can clone his internal drive to the new SSD before he does this? I guess he'd have to have an enclosure of some kind. I'm just thinking so he doesn't.
Just any, literally any. They're all over the place. You can get them for like $10 now.
What? The flash enclosures? External enclosures?
Yeah, no, it's just an external 2.5-inch hard drive enclosure. That's all it is. It's not specific to flash.
Right.
Or not.
You just put it in there.
Yeah.
And then he should clone his internal drive to that external drive before he takes the internal drive out, right?
Yep. Yep.
And then
you usually
ready.
you can just
Yeah.
usually it's as simple as just swapping them out. Yeah, once you've cloned it, you just open up your laptop, you swap the drives, and then you just so happen to now have a backup of what you just had sitting on a hard drive. Right?
And Samsung has I know Western Digital and Seagate, they all made cloning tools for this exact purpose. Samsung has one too, do they not?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Samsung. I think it's either a separate utility. Yeah, I think it's a separate utility. Magician is their software for like just optimizing.
It's Magician.
Stuff.
Okay, that's not the clone utility.
That's not the cloning, but I think there's one like right on their site for free download.
Good.
It's of course it looks for a Samsung drive.
But that's what you're gonna buy.
Right. Sure. Just
Data migration.
So now,
It's called Samsung Data Migration.
Yep.
And that's exactly what you need. It was designed for SSDs, but I presume that you could use it to copy from an internal spinning drive to your external.
Yep. And that
SSD.
one, if memory serves, that one even does some other tricks. Like say you have a larger hard drive in your laptop, like a 1 terabyte hard drive or something, and you only bought a 250 gig SSD. That tool, I believe, is smart enough where it'll go through and it'll say, okay, hey, you have a bunch of bulk media stuff over here. I'm going to separate that out and I'm going to leave it on the drive.
So
and
that's
I'm
smart.
not going to image it.
Yeah.
That's
right.
smart.
So it could basically just image only your
So your
OS.
whole Napster collection, you could just leave that on.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm legitimate now, and nothing but streaming from good sites for me.
So, all the bulk stuff just stays on the drive, on the hard disk, doesn't get cloned over, saves the space on the SSD, and then you just have to remember, well, okay, now it's still on the hard drive. I have to copy it somewhere else if I want to keep.
Yeah, but it's a good way of making sure that you don't. If you've got any malware or anything on there, it's a good way of making sure that you're not bringing that across as well.
That could go.
You don't have malware on your computer. If you do, then you should start over.
Yeah.
You think you might have malware? Start over.
Yeah.
This is the time.
Nuke the site from orbit.
An SSD install is a good time to just,
wipe it.
Slate it anyway.
So fast anyway. And then you're going to take the old drive and put that in an external enclosure because then you'll have access to your data.
Yeah.
Hey, it's so good to talk to you. Allyn Malventano, he's at PC Perspective. That's PCPER.com, a regular on Twitch This Week in Computer Hardware with Patrick and Ryan on our network. Come back and we're going to talk about trim. Apparently you can trim on El Capitan now.
Yeah.
On OS 10. So we'll talk about trim on Windows and Mac and why you want to do it. We'll talk about the different buses. There's lots more to talk about. Our SSD expert